Hi, Quincy. Where are you dialing in from today?
Hey, Julian. I'm dialing in from Seattle, Washington. Beautiful Pacific Northwest.
Awesome. Love to hear. I hopefully it's not too rainy and that you guys have already transitioned to summertime, which would obviously be the ideal situation.
Yeah, the spring has turned and it's starting to get really nice up here. So we're out of the cold, dark winter now, which is great. And now we have the
Amazing.
endless summer.
Awesome. So, Electric Era, that's the company that you founded and are the CEO of. So, could you describe briefly what Electric Era is and maybe sort of what your path and professional background is to starting the company?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with my background and then that'll contextualize, I think, the business a little bit better. But my background is in mechanical engineering. I was a mechanical engineer at SpaceX for 7 years. I worked on the Falcon 9 rocket, the Dragon spacecraft, and then was one of the team leads on the Starlink constellation program here in Seattle, Washington. And on that team, I oversaw the global deployment of the Gateway ground station network. While I was at SpaceX, I was thinking about wanting to start businesses and was basically cued into the fact that the public sector wasn't moving fast enough on climate. So I came to the realization, as any good capitalist does, that the private sector really needed to institute a kind of rapid and urgent course correction on electrification and climate tech. And I realized EV fast charging was kind of the central linchpin in mainstream EV adoption. Like a lot of people love EVs. Then now there's like this kind of next cohort of adopters coming online that don't want to like reinvent their life so that they can charge their car and use it. EVs are amazing, but there's definitely some adoption issues around EV fast charging. And that's where Electric Era comes in. Our company was founded to make EV fast charging ubiquitous, affordable, and reliable. We do that with a full turnkey EV fast charging station solution. This is a white labeled solution that we sell to car refill retailers like gas stations, convenience stores, quick service restaurants that are basically modernizing their business for the 21st century. They're digitizing and electrifying their car refill offerings. And Electric Era sells them a full turnkey solution. We build it for them and then we operate it for them. So think of our charging stations as basically a white labeled Tesla supercharging station engineered by former SpaceX engineers.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that introduction and super interesting. There's a ton of different charging solutions that are already out there on the market from like a white label perspective. Maybe what is the thing that separates Electric Era from some of your competitors out there when it comes to building, fabricating, and making your solution better than what actually exists in the market?
Yeah, so I think looking at the taxonomy of what exists in the market, you realize that the existing solutions are quite expensive and very unreliable. And they don't really emphasize kind of the retailer component of EV fast charging. The mere reverse of that is what we provide with our EV fast charging solutions at Electric Era. We provide the leading reliability fast charging solution that does not require an app or any sort of complex interaction to activate, that has the lowest total cost of ownership for our customers, and that has a suite of software that allows us to get drivers inside the store. We call this like our retail boost software suite. All of those things add up in a very material way to the business value that our customers are looking to create for themselves. They need reliable solutions so that they can drive utilization, so that they can get the drivers into the store, and they need to have that done affordably. So, from a technology perspective, we have built our own vertically integrated software stack that runs the entire hardware charging station. We call this PowerNode OS. This is something that was built entirely in-house over the last several years by largely former SpaceX engineers from the Starlink software team. Our VP of software, Sith, was there with me for about 7 years and is an exceptional software engineer. Software is kind of the key to make hardware excellent. I have a strong thesis that the largest market cap businesses of the 21st century will be built at the juxtaposition between hardware and software. But that's already playing out to be true. I mean, you look at companies like NVIDIA, their hardware and their CUDA software system come together to create an immense amount of shareholder value. And I think that's reflective of what we're building at Electric Era. We've started with a leading software system that runs our charging stations. And we actually own our own proprietary charging station design that leverages third-party vendor components. One of the key features of our charging stations that makes it so affordable is we have an on-site energy storage system at every single one of our charging stations. This allows us to basically buffer the electrical grid. It allows us to decrease time to market so we don't have to upgrade the grid. And it allows us to keep the OpEx cost structure lower for our customers so that they can effectuate EV fast charging at a much lower cost and therefore capture more profit margins for their station. So all of that comes together to be the leading solution for retailers in the space that are, again, modernizing car refill for EV drivers.
Super fascinating. And the battery, I feel like, is probably something that like really differentiates Electric Era from maybe some of your other competitors out there. I completely understand sort of like the time to market and the OpEx implications of having that battery storage solution on site. Does that ever create limitations from maybe additional capital requirements up front, or even like a space limitation? Because you mentioned a lot of your clients are maybe gas stations or other retailers who maybe, I don't know, is there a big space requirement for a battery like that?
Yeah, backing up, I'll get to your second questions in a second, but just for the audience, I think it's worth emphasizing how difficult the EV fast charging use case is on the electrical grid. Like as a mental model, basically like a single Tesla supercharging station is like consuming about 1,000 to 1,500 homes worth of power on one city block. So it's an extreme amount of power capacity required from the electrical grid. And historically, that has been fulfilled by basically building out the electrical grid, installing massive transformers that take 2 to 4 years to build, and in certain cases, actually reconductoring the distribution lines that deliver that power to the transformer so that you can deliver it to the site. We do away with all of that with, as you said, the battery system and dynamic load management software that runs the energy management of the station. And as a result, we can lower the electrical grid requirement by about 4x. So we can take 1,000 homes worth of power down to 250. So a 4x reduction in power capacity while still serving at our larger stations up to 135 sessions per day, which is a lot. So in terms of like, that's the benefit, right? And what's the cost? The cost is actually surprisingly low. Energy storage is quite affordable. We have a very affordable product. Basically, battery prices have been commoditizing over the last, call it 15 years. In 2008, they were like $2,000, $3,000 per kilowatt hour. Today, they're like approaching $50 per kilowatt hour. It's crazy how affordable battery cell technology is getting, which is awesome news because batteries are extremely useful for a bunch of different next-gen transportation use cases that I'm sure your audience is super interested in. So cost is actually quite competitive, and we've structured our products so that the total cost of ownership is actually a lot lower with the inclusion of an energy storage system. And that makes our customers' internal rate of return better, their ROI, and the profit margins on a gross margin adjusted basis. So wins across the board from a financial performance perspective. From a space perspective, great question. Generally, batteries are also just getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And we don't really use a very large shipping container sized battery. We actually use a pretty small battery. It's like 4 feet by 4 feet by 8 feet tall. There's like plenty of room for that at pretty much every single charging station that we build for our customers. Historically, we haven't had a problem fitting it in. So space-wise, not too much of a consideration. I think like the only place we've ever had an issue is for a customer that wanted to build a charging station on Rodeo Drive, which is like super prime real estate. There's like no extra space anywhere. So that one didn't make sense. But pretty much every other spot in the country we've ever looked at is like a great fit.
And you've emphasized a couple of times like the tech stack and the importance that it plays in your overall offering from the software perspective. That sounds great and all, but could you maybe walk me through from an operator what the tech stack allows me to do in terms of, does it help me better forecast downtime? Is it maybe easier for me to understand my unit economics? So like a customer, does it make it easier for me if I drive a Tesla to plug in and have seamless integration versus a Ford Mach-E kind of? And what does the consumer application look like of all that software?
Yeah, so I'll answer it from the perspective of the driver and then from the perspective of our customers, which are car refill retailers. So from the driver's perspective, you can find our stations on all of the major mapping apps. So Apple Maps, Google Maps, PlugShare, ChargeWay. Our locations get pulled into those maps. You can find our locations via that map, and those mapping systems actually get pulled into car infotainment systems as well. So if you're a driver, you're driving around, you need to fill up, you can select one of our stations or your car will automatically route you there. Given our reliability is so high, cars are starting to kind of bias towards optimizing routes for higher reliability stations. Actually, Rivian just did a big splashy announcement about this, and they're like constantly the leader, Tesla and them, in these types of things. So I think Kia and all these other companies are going to kind of follow suit. So your car automatically will route you to our station. You show up, you get out of your car, you plug in, you swipe your credit card, you walk away. It's as simple as that. No apps. I mean, apps are great and we'll probably have an app eventually, but it should just be super simple. And that's what we've engineered. So part of our tech stack from a technology perspective is actually a custom payments manager that allows us to oversee and provision the payments process, whether we have an internet connection or without. The way we do this without an internet connection is we actually have an edge compute system, like a little basically computer on site inside of our battery that operates locally in real time, basically at about 20 seconds latency. That can offline authorize a payment and get you going no matter if we have a signal or not. And then essentially we take all major payment types, everything from Google Pay, Apple Pay, Visa, and even the weird ones like MasterCard or American Express. It's funny, I always laugh when I'm like, oh yeah, I forget that people use those, but apparently a lot of people use them. So all of that is easy. And then basically the card just starts pulling power. And then on the back side, kind of the back end, if you will, actually briefly on the front side, you can like see kind of what the data is that your car's pulling. We like service up some cool insights at our charging stations because a lot of people like to know how fast they're charging, how long their trip will be, what their state of charge is. So all of that's on the screen on our chargers as well. So that's the front end. That's the driver experience. The back end is, I think, more interesting. Basically, our software does everything from energy management, driver experience, payments, operations, maintenance. We have our software system basically oversee all of those core functions. Practically, that means like we take care of the car to charger interface. We do the payments management. We do our dynamic load energy management system so we can keep your energy bills super low. We also have a dashboard that allows our customers to have insights about how their charging stations performing. You mentioned this earlier, but that's essentially our Power Node dashboard is where our customers can see their uptime, the reliability, the transactions, the number of repeat drivers, outstanding maintenance issues, or when a downtime event is going to occur for preventative maintenance. All of that gets handled through our enterprise dashboard that our customers have access to. So they can see it for one of their stations or for all of their stations. And aggregate, they get a lot of great insights because they're operating hundreds of stations at a time or will be with our technology and product. So that's a little bit about what we do. And again, it's all software, and it's kind of going back to the core theme of what we talked about earlier. It's software making hardware outstanding. And that's, again, why there's so much market cap being built in these combined hardware software companies.
Totally. Shifting gears a bit into sort of your go-to-market motion and maybe actually how you go about delivering this product. The first question I have is really from a business model perspective. We've seen a lot of different business models in the charging arena, and kind of curious why you maybe decided to go the route of selling the hardware and the software to someone to then basically tax the electric vehicle owners who come and charge at your stations versus maybe leasing the land and then taking the revenue directly from the EV chargers themselves. And kind of curious about why you thought this was maybe the better model for electric air and the pros and cons of both.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, like from our perspective, it was a more interesting business to build. I thought a lot about becoming a charging station network where we have thousands of charging stations across the country and we collect all the revenue. That's a great business, and a lot of people are building those businesses. That's actually the business that we help our customers create with our infrastructure solution. So we're a sticks and shovels provider, if you will, where we sell the full charging station. We build it for our customers. We help them get the grant funding, and then we operate it for them. So it's a full all-in-one model to providing car refill retailers a kind of a turnkey ecosystem solution so that they don't have to stand up specialty teams to do that internally. I think that specialization is key. That's exactly what they're looking for. And that was another reason why we decided to build that business model. We spent a lot of time in market talking, having commercial conversations with customers, and like voice of customer, which every founder and business operator needs to be obsessed with listening to. Your audience, voice of customer told us like, hey, we need help. We need help. We're experts at car refill, but we need your solutions because none of the technology works. Following that kind of the trail of crumbs, if you will, from the customer, we are basically arrived at the conclusion that that was the product that the market needed. And I think like more philosophically, there's companies like in the AI space, there's the NVIDIAs of the world who are kind of like Electric Era. They're an infrastructure solutions provider with their GPUs and their CUDA software. And then there's companies like OpenAI who are kind of like using that hardware infrastructure layer to effectuate application software services. Our customers are like OpenAI, and we're like the NVIDIA of the market. And again, I just thought that was where more innovation could happen and where more help was needed to enable mainstream EV adoption. And plus, also, it puts us in the driver's seat to do like a lot of rapid R&D that is going to advance the state of the art for power electronics, solid state transformers, software control systems, and a variety of other enabling technologies that will be required over the next 20 to 30 years to really enable the electric era, which is why we actually called the company what we did. Yeah, just kind of a more interesting space for me as a founder where I could really exercise my technology and product muscles while creating a lot of value for our customers.
If you could share, I'd be curious to know like what percentage of your revenue broken down is from sort of like the more ongoing fees versus the upfront installation of the hardware itself.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I could share like high level. I probably don't want to share too much, but generally like about 50% of our total lifetime profit comes from recurring revenue for operating, maintaining, and enabling the station with software services. And then about 50%, the other half rather, comes from like the initial build, the initial installation. And that's cumulative value to Electric Air, the corporation. That I think was also really key for us. Like we needed to set up a business model where we could have sustaining revenues imputed into the business for decades to come that provided us cash flow visibility rather. And I was pretty excited basically about like having those software solutions create a lot of value for our customers so that we could create a lot of value for our shareholders and our company. To answer your question earlier, that's the approximate breakdown. But generally speaking, we make a good amount of money on the initial build while still being the most competitively priced offering in the market. And that's ultimately because we have a very low cost of goods sold solution. So we're able to like create that value for our customers while still capturing a sizable profit share for ourselves. And then the other 50% or so comes from recurring revenue over time.
Great. Shifting gears again to like the customers that you actually service and work with. At the beginning, you mentioned gas station, retailers, others, people who have some sort of physical infrastructure in a parking lot that they ultimately want to generate more revenue from. Are you seeing a lot of one-off customers in terms of they have one location, they buy one charging station from you, or have there been actually like franchisees that maybe have 20 gas stations and they want to install Electric Air eventually across all their 20 gas stations? And kind of curious what that breakdown looks like within your customer.
Yeah, so we have some pretty exciting announcements coming out on that front. Unfortunately, can't share too much on that yet, but in general, we're definitely starting to move into the larger deployment category where we will be deploying 20, 30, 50 stations at a time with a single entity. Historically, it's been more of the 1 and 2 and up to 5 locations at a time type deals, just because that's reflective of kind of like our earlier in the market motion. We closed our Series A last year, so we have about 30 people, and we're kind of, as a sales team, transitioning from selling into the SMB segment to the enterprise segment, and have some pretty important announcements coming out over the next several quarters along that front for those larger deals that will deploy ultimately over the next couple of years, even hundreds, if not 1,000 plus charging stations across America for EV drivers that want reliable fast charging anywhere and everywhere. From a customer's perspective, as you said, it's gas stations, convenience stores, quick service restaurants, basically businesses that have been in the business of car refill that are now modernizing. So a couple of our customers are folks like Plaid Pantry. They have 108 stores in the Pacific Northwest, convenience stores specifically. They're starting to add EV fast charging. That was actually our very first deployment. Space Age Fuels. They're kind of like a Buc-ee's for the Pacific Northwest, where they have these really great locations that drivers love to stop at. We're about to energize a station with them. So folks like that, where they have great amenities on site, good bathrooms, in certain cases, Wi-Fi and safe, well-lit locations along great routes. Those are actually where we only choose to work with those people, basically. Like, we're pretty picky on who we work with. We could work with a ton of folks if we wanted to, but it, I think, behooves the industry and the drivers to only install in those locations, because I have a strong thesis that that's where EV drivers want to be when they're spending 15 minutes. They want to go inside, they want to use the restroom, they want to buy some snacks, some food, whatever it is, and spend 15 to 20 minutes before they get back on the road.
Super fascinating. And I guess if I'm thinking about like eventually like what your TAM will expand into, a huge amount of charging today happens at public charging stations like the ones that you're talking about. Do you ever foresee yourself going into like the home charging space in terms of being able to provide a solution for individual homes, or is that just a completely different go-to-market motion and not something that you've really considered to date?
There's a lot of interesting work to be done with home electrification. I don't think I've seen a business out there that has really nailed it yet. Even Tesla, I think, could improve their kind of home electrification products. I have thought about that a little bit. I'm not as excited about spending our time and resources on the home electrification and home charging, but it is something I've thought about. I think for us, what we will expand into are the 156,000 convenience stores and the 195,000 quick service restaurants across America, providing them the category leading retail adjacent EV fast charging solution. I think public EV fast charging at those locations is a massive TAM, and we're going to serve a lot of drivers at these locations in the decades to come. I think generally speaking, our core technologies are applicable to a lot of other use cases as well. Fleet charging, we definitely create a lot of value for customers there. We haven't done that yet just because we want to focus on light duty. And then, as I think we were talking about before we were recording, there's interest in the heavy duty charging, or rather heavy duty EV segment. Like actually just yesterday, Tesla announced that they're, I think, going to start doing production in 2026 on their Tesla heavy duty vehicles. And they're going to ramp up to like 50,000 units per year. Their stock price like jumped on the news because that is a huge segment. And they actually have a product that is more competitive than gas. So gas heavy duty vehicles are going to go away and they're going to be replaced with electric, just on the pure merits of the product's performance and its lower total cost of ownership, lower maintenance, lower energy costs, et cetera. But that market's not quite there yet. I think once the trucks like really start hitting the roads, we'll productize a solution for retailers that want to add heavy duty fast charging and provide probably even more value to those folks than we do in the light duty segment, because the batteries are so important to buffer the grid. And some of the things we're starting to think about for our V4 product line will also just help get grid access easier. Lots of good stuff to do in that one as well.
I guess this brings up a follow-on question for me that's slightly adjacent, but also a bit tangential. Is that you've been talking a lot about how this shift to EVs is really taxing the grid, but also it's taxing a variety of different elements within our society. And one that I kind of have a question for you about is, as you see this expansion, how are you finding, is it been a challenge to maybe find qualified people to install your stations at places? Are there enough electricians and qualified people to install it? Or has that also been a challenge to date to kind of unlock the third parties that you need to actually install?
Yeah, I'll speak to the meta point and then answer the specific question. I think the meta point that's probably going to be really interesting to your listenership is the fact that over the next 2 to 3 decades, we're basically going to put about 2 to 3 times as much energy through the grid than we do today due to the transition to electric forms of transportation. And in general, I think that's a good thing. Although, because for people that want to go build businesses in the space, there's like a lot of really interesting business opportunities that create value to solve that problem, solve the problems associated with putting that much more energy into the grid. The transition is going to be full of challenges. I think we're largely solving all of the major challenges in the light duty segment and can solve all of the challenges in the heavy duty segment. But the impact to the grid at large is quite massive, and there's going to be a lot of interesting solutions that need to be created to solve all the other use cases. But I provide that context as a segue into the following, which is like, yes, it is hard to do things. It's hard to build things in the physical world, and it's hard for a variety of reasons. I think labor shortages, credible construction companies, speed and efficiency of permitting and AHJ buy-off, which stands for authority having jurisdiction buy-off. Like, our country just needs to get better at building things faster. If we want to like live in a very, very futuristic society that has widespread prosperity, I think anybody and everybody should want to move faster in building the physical world. I think just generally getting things through permitting is probably like the number one friction point. Whatever we can do from the government's perspective to kind of move with more urgency to approve these new projects, whether it's a charging station or a windmill or a solar array or a nuclear power plant or a data center or transmission lines that go to the data center that's running a huge AI GPU cluster. Like, all of that just needs to be built faster. And like, we just don't do that very well in the US anymore. So yes, human labor is a constraint, but just physically getting it built and through permitting is the actual constraint. And generally, what I said earlier, I think is true, is like, if we do it faster, we can build the future faster, and that creates broader, wider prosperity and cleaner energy sources for society at large. So like, 100% we need to move quicker.
Yeah. I mean, a lot to unpack there. I think that's like a super interesting point. And I think especially at us in business school token in terms of, I think a lot of times when people were asking what's the next big thing that's going to change a lot of the business world, like you had internet, then you had the mobile revolution, now it's the AI revolution. And so I think the transition to EV or electric vehicles or electric in general is going to be another big business transition that people maybe doesn't get enough credit, I think, often in the hallways of business school. So very interesting point. The second thing, or not even the second thing, but just another question I have, we've been talking about a lot in terms of what Tesla is doing, given sort of their role as being the market leader in EVs today and their charging network that they've built. Curious, have you seen sort of like that massive supercharger network be something that is almost a barrier for your expansion? Or do you almost see it like, okay, Tesla's actually now done a lot of the hard work of making EVs palatable for the large part of the population, and now they're ready to maybe try new solutions and kind of be a little bit more creative with how they're going about doing it?
Yeah, definitely more the latter. I think it's like we're just so in the early days of the big build out and the transition to electric vehicles that even if Tesla was still operating at full bore, they're only building like a tiny fraction of the total needed EV fast charging stations that we need to turn online by 2030. If I remember correctly, they basically built like 384 stations in Q4 last year. And we need something like 100,000 by the end of the decade. Tesla is a badass company. I really respect the work that they've done, and they've gotten a lot of amazing people, but they need help. Like, just from a first principles mathematics perspective, it's like they just can't do it by themselves or even come close. So they need really good other entities like Electric Era to go stand up the physical infrastructure and the enabling technologies. And to comment on one other thing you mentioned, yes, they definitely have done a lot of work kind of developing best practices. And I think there's many companies, or rather I should say companies like Electric Era, definitely in a way riding in their wake on that front, just because they've familiarized the entire world with electric vehicles and EV fast charging. So huge shout out to the Tesla team, and excited to contribute to the electric revolution with them.
Awesome. The next question I have is sort of around funding environment, given that you are a hardware focused company and given that funding has been harder to come by in recent years, and you mentioned you closed your Series A last year. Did you find maybe that it was harder in this macro environment to maybe raise the amount that you needed and maybe will need to raise in the future? And if so, did that maybe help you build a leaner, more profitable business in the long term? Just kind of curious for your thoughts on the fundraising environment.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yes, it was much harder to raise capital. And yes, it has made us a leaner and more badass company. And I think that's good. I think that the high cost of capital, the high interest rate environment it's actually super healthy. We really needed that. The country now has a hurdle rate for an economic investment, and we didn't have that before. And there was just a bunch of nonsense companies being built and funded and spun out into the public markets only to have like the entire shareholder value collapse. And like, that's terrible. I mean, that should be illegal. Like, we shouldn't allow companies to do these like big speculative SPAC outs that actually have no intrinsic value. In general, I think it's like very healthy and needed. It certainly makes it harder to operate and raise capital, but really, like, even then, it's like there's just so much liquidity and so much capital deploy in the Western world and in any free market economy, and certainly America. Capital is going to flood in. Capital is a commodity, like, fundamentally, and the real critical resource are fantastic, extremely good business fundamental corporations. And like, if you do those things, the capital will guarantee be there in droves. For me, it's pretty simple. It's like, okay, I just need to build the world's best team. I need them to be working on extreme high value creation activities and products and services. I need them to distribute that into the market. I need them to then go and effectuate the deliverable for the customer and implement and build the station. And then I need them to operate the station super reliably. And if we do all those things well, which we do, we create a lot of free cash flow for our corporation. And generally speaking, we have like a very low burn rate as a company. And we're like actually every day talking about how to get to profitability, because if we can do that, our shareholder value skyrockets. So we're very focused on that objective. And that is a direct byproduct of the high interest rate environment. And again, I think that's all good. I mean, the alternative is a company that just does a bunch of nothing, raises capital easy, then does a bunch more of nothing, And then nothing actually happens, right? No charging stations get built, no EV drivers convert. We don't really create any long-term sustaining shareholder value, and it's all just meaningless. So I'm very much appreciative of the market environment because it sharpens your blade, right? Steel sharpens steel, as the expression goes. And I think that's very true for founders and business operators in the market right now.
Great. And yeah, I think that's definitely been a sentiment that's been echoed. I think for us being students on the other side looking for jobs, it sometimes can feel a little scary because there's been way less hiring than there maybe was in the low interest rate environments. But I think it probably will ultimately, to your point, lead to a more sustainable set of businesses that are created, which will hopefully lead to more jobs for us in a couple of years. Given that we are an MBA podcast and a lot of students who listen who maybe want to transition into the hard tech world and especially are really motivated by sustainability, for those who maybe don't have the technical background like yourselves, like what are maybe some recommendations that you have for more business-minded people to get into companies like Electric Era that are building really exciting hardware products who just maybe more have a business background?
Yeah, I tell this to every MBA person or class or panel I speak on. I really think it behooves every MBA school in America should be teaching just enterprise sales. In fact, it's just quite very odd to me that they don't, and that there's not emphasis put on this. And like, sales is not a dirty word. Sales is the agent of commercialization, and it's the only thing that really matters. You have to get revenue into the corporation, and the way that you do it is through business development, sales. And sales at a tech startup or just in any technology space is like a super sophisticated, deeply strategic and challenging activity that exercises your business muscles. So sales is awesome. And I always recommend this book, but it's basically because it's like the first principles of like how to run very sophisticated multi-stakeholder, multi-department enterprise sales motions. It's called The Qualified Sales Leader by John McMahon. He's like a 5-time CRO, extremely capable individual. He sits on the board of Snowflake, and he wrote this great book, and our entire sales team reads it. Even if you don't do sales at Electric Era, you read it because at the end of the day, it just teaches you how to deliver customer value and to actually effectuate a commercial offtake. I would say that is by far and away the best thing you can do if you really want to get a job and you're not like a technically minded person. And then I'd say like secondary items are like operations. Strategy for an early stage business is like just solely done by the board and the CEO. So you won't really find like a strategy team, but like you'll definitely find ops teams. For us, we have like an ops team that does site acquisition. So it's not like really a sales motion, but you still have to like kind of pitch people on the idea of giving up their sites for our asset manager customers. And that's kind of an ops motion, and it still requires a lot of technical acumen, but just like a high level version. And it certainly requires like that business sales mindset. Those are, I think, by far and away the two top things that any MBA student should be thinking about and positioning their skill set for.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's actually something that surprised me about my MBA experience today is honestly the lack of sales classes. Even do communications, but definitely not always in the sales mindset. So the point is well taken. To close out the podcast, just curious if there's sort of like any big milestones that you're looking forward to at Electric Era in 2024 or even beyond that you'd be comfortable sharing, and maybe something that you're excited about even beyond within the industry of EVs.
I think we're building a lot of stations right now. And I think something I've realized recently that's pretty exciting is we'll probably have around 20 charging stations in the Electric Era network. These are customer stations that we own and that we operate for our customers that make up the Electric Era network. And we're starting to fill out pretty important strategic corridors like the I-5 corridor on the West Coast. And we'll probably have 20, maybe 30 built by the end of this year. So that's like a huge milestone for us and is a great source of super reliable charging for drivers and utilization for our customers. So I think that's one big milestone. I think another, I mean, this is a little bit of a tangent, but like just generally, I would take a very close look if you're interested in mobility at what's happening in autonomous driving right now. Tesla is actually solving the problem, not fake solving it, but actually solving it. They're running an end-to-end neural net, and they're like basically training via back propagation and gradient descent, the neural net with their massive data set of driver data. And the latest software release is like fantastic. I think they're literally going to do that. They're literally going to have autonomous vehicles very shortly. And their robo-taxi announcement's coming out in August, and that's going to revolutionize mobility forever and always. So that's a majorly cool milestone. And it's also going to be a pull ahead for like a big sales leader for EVs at large, because electric vehicles are really the only ones that can do that type of technology, because they have like a networked ecosystem and rapid control loops. That's a huge milestone, and everybody should be pumped for that. And then beyond that, I mean, man, what a crazy world mobility is. Like, it's just changing so fast. Like, nobody thought it was possible that the Tesla semi truck could exist. Like, that just was unconceivable from a physics perspective, even just like 5 years ago. And the technology's just gotten so freaking good that they're actually literally towing around like 80,000 pounds of stuff for 500 miles on one charge. That's going to, again, revolutionize shipping and logistics. So lots of good stuff happening, and very fortunate to be part of this industry.
Well, thank you so much again, Quincy, for joining the podcast. I was very excited about this episode, and it was definitely awesome. So thank you so much again for joining, and hope you stay in the working ecosystem.
Will do. Thanks, Julian.